What even is a blueprint interface? If you've ever found yourself casting to a bunch of different actors just to call one function, there's a very good chance that a blueprint interface is what you need. So I'm starting a new series called What Even Is, where we break down confusing Unreal Engine concepts in just a few minutes. So we're going to start simple. Blueprint interface is basically a contract between blueprints. It defines functions that any blueprint can implement without those blueprints needing to know information about each other. That means instead of casting to specific classes, you can just send a message through the interface and anything that implements that can respond. So let's say in your project, your player can interact with different things, like a door, maybe a pickup item, or NPCs. Normally, you might have something going on like this. The player presses E, it shoots a line trace, the line trace hits an actor, and then we cast to our blueprint door, and we call an open door function. This will work, as you can see in the example. If we approach the door and we press E, you can see that the door rotates. So that does work, but you may also be able to tell that because we had to cast to the specific actor, not only are we creating a hard reference and casting to the actor, this can get really messy in the future. So instead, we can create something like a blueprint interface, and we can call that something like BPI Interact. So you can open your content drawer, right click, go to click blueprint interface, call this BPI Interact. So something that's good to remember is that blueprint interfaces do not contain logic or variables. You can't put them in there. They simply contain signatures for functions that we create. So what that does is it allows other classes to implement these and be able to respond when they're called. So we can create our first function and just simply call it interact. We don't need any inputs or any outputs. Once we have that created, we can go into our blueprint that we want to be able to interact with, go up to the class settings. You'll see a spot for implemented interfaces. Click add. We can search for our interface, BPI Interact, and now this blueprint on compile will implement the interact function that we created. So what we can do now is we can go back into the event graph. You can double click on your blueprint interface function that we created, interact, and we now implemented that in the door. So now we can use our existing open door function that we've created previously, and we can have that execute when the event interact is called from the interface. So now to show you how to do that, we can go back into our interaction event and find where our cast was. We can get rid of the cast, and now off of the hit actor, we can drag off and we can do interact, if I could type correctly. And you're going to look for BPI Interact, and that is our interact function, and you want the message. Click that, and that's it. You've now successfully replaced casting with a blueprint interface function. So now the door will work exactly the same as it did when we were casting, except it's a lot cleaner. And now any blueprint that implements that interface will receive this interact message. So this is going to help keep your blueprints way cleaner, especially when scaling up the project and adding more actors that can be interacted with. The other nice part about interface functions is if this actor doesn't implement the interface, it will just do nothing. It won't interact, it won't call any functions, and it won't break. It just does nothing. So I'll show you again the example in map. We can go approach the door, press E, and you've now successfully implemented using blueprint interfaces. And I know I mentioned it previously, but just a couple of things to keep in mind. These are just a couple of tips. Interfaces don't store variables. They do not contain logic, and they're best for communication between different types of actors. So think of them as a shared language between blueprints. So if you guys out, consider dropping a like and subscribing and turning on notifications so you get alerted when I post new videos. Thanks everyone who's been here for the journey, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.